The early morning sun slowly rose above the green hills of Enugu, painting the sky with soft shades of orange and gold. The cool morning breeze danced through the tall trees, making the leaves rustle gently. Birds sang cheerful songs as if welcoming another beautiful day. Deep inside one of the forests outside Enugu lived a young woman named Ada. Ada was 22 years old. She had no house. She had no family. She had no money. The forest had become her only home. Many years earlier, Ada's parents had died in a terrible road accident while returning from a local market. She had been only 12 years old then. With no relatives willing to care for her, she wandered from one village to another until she finally settled near the forest. At first, life was difficult. She cried herself to sleep every night, wondering why life had been so cruel to her. But over the years, sadness slowly turned into strength. Instead of giving up, Ada decided she would survive. She carefully watched experienced hunters from a distance. She learned how they followed animal footprints, how they set simple traps, and how they respected nature. She practiced every day until she became one of the best hunters in the area. Her life was simple. She built a small shelter from strong tree branches, bamboo, and dried palm leaves. It was not much to look at, but it protected her from heavy rain and the hot afternoon sun. Inside the shelter was a small bed made from dry grass covered with animal skins she had prepared herself. A clay pot sat near the fireplace. A wooden bowl rested beside it. Everything Ada owned could fit inside her little shelter. She never complained. As the first rays of sunlight reached her shelter, Ada opened her eyes. She stretched her strong arms and sat up with a smile. "Thank you, God," she whispered quietly. She always started every morning with those words. She stepped outside barefoot and looked around. The forest was peaceful. Mist floated between the tall trees while small animals moved quietly through the bushes. Ada walked toward a nearby stream carrying a wooden container. She knelt beside the clear water and washed her face. Her reflection appeared on the surface. She had smooth dark skin that glowed naturally under the morning light. Her long black hair was tied neatly behind her head to keep it out of her face while hunting. Years of surviving alone had made her body strong and muscular. Her shoulders were broad, her arms powerful, and her legs firm from walking long distances every day. Although life had been hard, kindness still shone in her eyes. After drinking some fresh water, Ada returned to her shelter. She picked up her handmade bow. Then she checked the sharp arrows she had carefully carved from bamboo. Everything was ready. "Today should be a good day," she said to herself with a hopeful smile. She walked quietly into the deeper part of the forest. Every step was careful. Every sound mattered. She knew the forest almost as well as she knew herself. The songs of birds, the movement of leaves, and even the direction of the wind all told her important stories. Suddenly, she noticed fresh footprints on the soft ground. She knelt down. "Grass cutter," she whispered. The footprints were still fresh. The animal could not be far away. Ada moved slowly between the trees, making almost no sound. She carefully pushed aside thick bushes and listened. There it was. A large grass cutter was feeding quietly among the tall grass. Ada slowly raised her bow. She took a deep breath. Her eyes remained fixed on the animal. Then she released the arrow. Whoosh! The arrow flew straight through the air. The grass cutter jumped once before falling to the ground. Ada hurried over. "Thank you," she said softly. She always thanked every animal she hunted because she believed nature deserved respect. She tied the animal to a long stick and continued walking. Before noon, she had also caught 2 rabbits using traps she had set the previous day. Satisfied with her success, she made her way toward a nearby village. The villagers knew Ada well. Some children ran toward her with excitement. "Ada is here. The hunter has returned." She smiled warmly. One little boy looked at the rabbits with wide eyes. "My mother has been sick," he said quietly. "We haven't eaten meat in many weeks." Ada looked at the boy. She knew his family struggled every day. Without thinking twice, she untied one rabbit and placed it gently into his hands. The boy stared at her in surprise. "For us?" he asked. Ada nodded. Take it home. His eyes filled with tears. Thank you. He hugged her tightly before running home as fast as he could. Nearby women smiled. One elderly woman shook her head with admiration. That girl has almost nothing, she said. Yet she always gives. Another woman agreed. Some rich people have plenty but never share. Ada heard their words but simply smiled. She did not help people because she wanted praise. She helped because she understood hunger. She understood loneliness. She understood pain. After selling the remaining meat, Ada earned just enough money to buy a little salt, some dried pepper, a small bag of gari, and a bar of bathing soap. She counted every naira carefully. Nothing was wasted. As she prepared to leave the village, she noticed a very old man sitting beneath a tree. His hands trembled as he tried to carry a heavy basket filled with cassava. Without saying a word, Ada walked over. May I help you? The old man looked up. You don't have to. I want to. She lifted the basket as though it weighed almost nothing. The old man's eyes widened. You are stronger than my grandsons. He laughed. Ada laughed too. She carried the basket all the way to his small house. When they arrived, the old man tried to give her some money. She gently pushed his hand away. No, Papa. Please take it. You need it more than I do. The old man smiled with respect. God will reward you, my daughter. Ada thanked him before beginning the long walk back toward the forest. As evening approached, the sky slowly changed colors. Orange became pink. Pink became purple. The cool evening breeze returned. Back at her shelter, Ada prepared a simple meal over the fire. She roasted part of the grass cutter and boiled some vegetables she had gathered nearby. The smell filled the air. She ate quietly while watching the flames dance. Life was not easy. Some nights she slept hungry. During the rainy season, water leaked through her roof. Sometimes dangerous snakes came too close to her shelter. Other times wild animals wandered nearby after dark. Still, Ada never allowed bitterness to enter her heart. She believed tomorrow could always be better. After dinner, she walked outside. Above her, thousands of stars sparkled across the clear night sky. She loved looking at the stars. Whenever she felt lonely, she imagined her parents watching over her from heaven. I hope you're proud of me, she whispered softly. A gentle wind blew through the trees. For a moment she felt peace. Far away in the city of Enugu, another life was unfolding. Luxury cars drove through brightly lit streets. Business executives rushed into expensive hotels. Television stations reported exciting news. One news reporter smiled into the camera. Nigeria's famous billionaire businessman, Obinna Okeke, has arrived in Enugu today. His company plans to begin one of the largest construction projects ever seen in the state. Many believe the project will create thousands of jobs and transform the local economy. People gathered around televisions in shops and restaurants. Some admired him. Others wished they could meet him. In the village near the forest, people talked excitedly. I heard he owns companies across Africa. They say he's worth billions. I've never seen someone that rich. He'll probably stay in one of the biggest hotels. The conversation continued long into the evening, but Ada heard none of it. She had never owned a television. She rarely visited town. The name Obinna Okeke meant absolutely nothing to her. As darkness covered the forest, she returned to her small shelter, spread her animal skin across her grass bed, and lay down to rest. She had no idea that somewhere not far away, the billionaire everyone admired had just arrived in Enugu. She also had no idea that destiny was quietly preparing to bring two completely different worlds together. One lived in unimaginable wealth. The other survived with almost nothing. Yet before long, their lives would cross in a way neither of them could ever imagine. And that meeting would change both of their lives forever. The bright morning sun shone over the beautiful city of Enugu. Cars moved through the busy streets as people hurried to work, traders arranged their goods, and students walked to school carrying backpacks. Outside one of the finest hotels in the city, several black luxury SUVs waited quietly. Security officers stood nearby, watching everything carefully. A few moments later, a tall, handsome man walked out of the hotel. It was Obinna Okeke. At 30 years old, Obinna had become one of the youngest billionaires in Nigeria. He owned a large construction company that had completed roads, bridges, office buildings, and housing estates across the country. Newspapers often called him the builder of dreams. But behind the expensive suits, private jets, and luxury cars was a man who often felt lonely. Many people wanted to be close to him. Some wanted business contracts. Others wanted money. Some women claimed to love him, but after many disappointments, Obinna had begun to wonder if anyone truly cared about him as a person. As he adjusted the sleeves of his light blue shirt, his personal assistant, Chinedu, hurried toward him holding a tablet. "Good morning, sir." "Good morning, Chinedu. The survey team is ready. The state officials are already waiting at the project site." Obinna smiled. "Let's go." The convoy of luxury SUVs drove through Enugu, attracting curious looks from people along the roads. Children waved excitedly. Some adults stopped to watch. Before long, the vehicles left the city and traveled toward a large piece of land surrounded by hills and thick forest. This was where Obinna planned to build a modern housing estate that would provide affordable homes for hundreds of families. Several engineers were already waiting. They greeted him respectfully. "Good morning, sir." "Good morning, everyone," Obinna replied with a friendly smile. He never liked treating people as if they were beneath him. After exchanging greetings, the engineers spread out large maps on the hood of one of the vehicles. "This area covers almost 500 hectares, one engineer explained. "The soil tests look good. The main challenge is the forest." Obinna studied the map carefully. He looked up at the trees stretching into the distance. The forest seemed peaceful, beautiful, untouched. "I'd like to see it myself," he said. One security officer stepped forward immediately. "Sir, we'll come with you." Obinna shook his head. "I'll only be gone for a few minutes." "Sir, it's safer if we stay close." Obinna smiled. "I've spent my whole life surrounded by people. I just want a little quiet." The security team exchanged worried looks. They knew their boss sometimes enjoyed being alone. "Very well, sir," one of them said. "Please don't go too far." "I won't." Obinna walked away from the group and entered the forest. At first, he simply admired the beauty around him. Tall trees reached toward the sky. Butterflies fluttered among colorful flowers. Birds sang from hidden branches. The fresh air felt different from the crowded city. For the first time in weeks, he felt relaxed. He followed a narrow path between the trees. As he walked, he remembered his childhood. Before becoming a billionaire, his family had lived in a small town. His late father had loved nature. They often walked through nearby forests together. Back then, life had been much simpler. His father had taught him something he would never forget. No matter how successful you become, never think you're greater than anyone else. Obinna smiled softly at the memory. "I still remember, Dad," he whispered. Lost in thought, he continued walking. He didn't realize how far he had gone. Suddenly, the wind changed. Dark clouds began gathering overhead. The cheerful songs of birds slowly faded. The forest became strangely quiet. Obinna looked up. "I should head back." He turned around. Then he stopped. The path behind him looked unfamiliar. He frowned. "Wasn't I just here?" He looked to his left. Everything looked the same. He looked to his right. More trees. More bushes. He walked in what he believed was the correct direction. 10 minutes passed. Then 20. Instead of finding the survey team, he found himself deeper inside the forest. His smile disappeared. "This isn't good." He reached into his pocket and pulled out his expensive smartphone. No signal. He raised the phone higher. Still nothing. He tried calling Chinedu. The call failed immediately. A distant rumble echoed across the sky. Thunder. The first drops of rain fell onto the leaves. Within seconds, the light rain became a heavy downpour. Water poured from the sky. The ground quickly turned muddy. Obinna removed his suit jacket and held it over his head. But it did little to stop the rain. His shoes sank into the wet earth. The path disappeared beneath flowing water. He tried walking faster. Instead, he slipped. Ah! He landed hard on the muddy ground. His white shirt was now covered in dirt. His expensive watch was splashed with mud. For a moment, he simply sat there. If anyone from the business world could see him now, they would hardly recognize him. He stood slowly and wiped the mud from his face. This is unbelievable. The rain continued without mercy. Lightning flashed across the dark sky. Thunder shook the forest. Obinna searched desperately for shelter. Finally, he spotted a large rocky overhang. He hurried beneath it and leaned against the stone wall. Although it protected him from the rain, he was already soaked. Minutes turned into hours. The storm refused to stop. His stomach growled loudly. He had skipped breakfast because of the early meeting. Now hunger was beginning to set in. He searched his pockets. Nothing. No food. No snacks. Only his useless phone and wallet filled with cash. He laughed bitterly. What good is all this money now? The forest couldn't accept credit cards. It didn't care about bank accounts. It didn't recognize billionaires. Nature treated everyone the same. As evening approached, the rain finally slowed. Obinna stepped out from beneath the rocks. The air had become cooler. Mist floated through the trees. Everything looked darker than before. He started walking again. His wet clothes clung to his body. His legs felt tired. He called out loudly, "Hello!" No answer. "Is anyone there?" Only the sound of birds answered him. He kept walking. Then suddenly, rustle. Something moved inside a nearby bush. Obinna froze. His heart pounded. The leaves shook again. A wild bush pig burst from the bushes and ran across the path before disappearing into the trees. Obinna let out a long breath. "You frightened me." But his relief lasted only a few seconds. Soon strange sounds echoed through the forest. Owls hooted. Crickets chirped. Branches cracked somewhere in the darkness. Every sound seemed louder than before. For the first time in many years, fear slowly entered his heart. He had negotiated billionaire business deals. He had spoken before thousands of people. He had overcome fierce competitors. But none of those experiences prepared him for being alone in an unfamiliar forest after sunset. He continued walking until his legs could barely carry him. The sky grew darker. The moon remained hidden behind thick clouds. Eventually, exhaustion forced him to stop. He leaned against a large tree and slowly slid down until he was sitting on the ground. His stomach growled again. His throat felt dry. He closed his eyes. "Please, God," he whispered quietly. "I've always believed I could solve every problem with planning and hard work. But today, I need your help." The wind blew gently through the trees. Far away, a faint sound reached his ears. It was difficult to hear. At first he thought he was imagining it. Then he heard it again. Someone was singing. A soft, peaceful voice floated through the forest. Obinna slowly lifted his head. The singing sounded closer now. Hope returned to his tired face. He struggled to his feet. Using the last of his strength, he shouted as loudly as he could. "Help!" His voice echoed between the trees. Silence followed. Then he shouted again. "Please, is anyone there?" The forest became quiet once more. He listened carefully. A few moments later, he heard the sound of footsteps moving steadily through the bushes. Someone was coming. Obinna held his breath. He could not see who it was. Only a shadow appeared between the trees. The mysterious figure moved confidently through the dark forest as though it knew every path by heart. Obinna's heart beat faster. He had no idea that the person approaching him was not a villager. It was a young homeless hunter named Ada, returning to her small shelter after another long day in the forest. Their first meeting was only moments away. Neither of them knew that this single encounter would change their lives forever. The forest had become quiet after the heavy rain. Water dripped slowly from the leaves, forming tiny pools on the ground. The cool night air carried the fresh smell of wet earth, while crickets sang from hidden corners of the forest. Ada walked confidently along a narrow path with a bundle of firewood tied across her back. Her bow rested over one shoulder, and a small leather bag filled with wild fruits hung from her waist. She knew this forest better than anyone. Every tree, every stream, every hidden path. She could tell where an animal had walked simply by looking at the broken grass. She could tell if rain would return by watching the movement of birds. Years of living in the forest had taught her lessons no classroom ever could. As she walked toward her shelter, she suddenly stopped. She heard something. "Help!" The voice was faint. Ada stood still. Her sharp eyes scanned the darkness. Again she heard it. "Please, is anyone there?" She frowned. "No one comes this deep into the forest at night," she whispered. Most villagers avoided this part of the forest after sunset. They believed dangerous animals roamed freely here, and many feared getting lost. Ada tightened her grip on her bow. The voice could belong to someone in trouble, or it could be a trap. She moved carefully toward the sound. Her footsteps made almost no noise. She pushed aside thick branches and walked around fallen trees until she finally saw a man leaning weakly against a large tree. Even in the darkness, she could tell he was not an ordinary traveler. His clothes were expensive, though now soaked with rain and covered in mud. His leather shoes were scratched. A costly wristwatch reflected the moonlight. His face showed exhaustion. Obinna looked up when he heard footsteps. At first, he could only make out the outline of a person. Then the figure stepped into the moonlight. Standing before him was a young woman carrying a bow. She was tall and athletic. Her dark skin glowed beneath the silver moonlight. Her long black hair was tied neatly behind her head. Her muscular arms showed years of hard work. She looked alert, confident, and fearless. For a brief moment, neither of them spoke. Ada broke the silence. "Who are you?" "My name is Obinna." "What are you doing here?" "I got lost." She studied him carefully. "You came into this forest alone?" Obinna nodded weakly. "I thought I could find my way back." Ada sighed softly. "The forest doesn't forgive carelessness." Obinna gave a tired smile. "I've already learned that lesson." She noticed how pale he looked. "When was the last time you ate?" He thought for a moment. "Yesterday evening." Ada's eyes widened. "You haven't eaten all day?" "I didn't have the chance." His stomach growled loudly, making him laugh in embarrassment. Ada smiled for the first time. "At least your stomach is honest." Obinna laughed quietly despite his exhaustion. It was the first time anyone had joked with him since he became a billionaire. Most people around him were always careful with their words. This young woman wasn't. She simply treated him like another human being. Ada reached into her leather bag and removed 2 ripe wild oranges. She handed them to him. "Eat." Obinna hesitated. "What about you?" "I've already eaten." "Are you sure?" She nodded. He accepted the fruit gratefully. "Thank you." He peeled one quickly and took a bite. It tasted sweeter than anything he had eaten in weeks. Perhaps it was because he was so hungry. Perhaps it was because someone had offered it with genuine kindness. Either way, it felt special. After finishing both oranges, he sighed with relief. "I don't know how to thank you." "You can start by standing." Obinna tried. His legs trembled. He almost fell. Without thinking, Ada stepped forward and caught his arm before he hit the ground. "You've lost too much strength." "I'm sorry." "Don't apologize." She looked around. "My shelter isn't far." "You live here?" "Yes." "In the forest?" "Where else?" Obinna looked surprised but asked no further questions. "Can you walk?" "I'll try." Ada placed one of his arms across her shoulders. Although she was much younger than him, she supported his weight with surprising ease. Obinna was amazed. "You are very strong." She smiled. "The forest makes everyone strong." Together they walked through the dark woods. Along the way, Ada pointed toward several plants. "Don't touch those leaves." "Why?" "They'll make your skin itch for days." A little farther ahead she stopped suddenly. She raised one hand. "What is it?" Obinna whispered. She listened carefully, then relaxed. "Only monkeys." They continued walking. Obinna noticed how confidently she moved. She never seemed confused. Even in the darkness, She knew exactly where to step. Eventually, a warm glow appeared ahead. "My home," Ada said. Obinna expected to see a village. Instead, he found a small shelter built from wood, bamboo, and palm leaves. It was simple, very simple, yet everything was clean and carefully arranged. A small fire burned outside. Several clay pots sat beside it. Bundles of dry firewood were stacked neatly against one wall. A wooden rack held smoked meat drying above the fire. Obinna looked around in amazement. "You built this yourself?" "Yes." "Alone?" "Yes." He shook his head in admiration. "I don't think I could." Ada laughed. "You'd learn." She helped him sit on a wooden stool beside the fire. "You need warmth." The fire felt wonderful against his cold skin. Ada disappeared briefly into the shelter before returning with a folded animal skin. "Wrap yourself." He accepted it. "Thank you." She knelt beside the fire and began preparing food. From one clay pot she removed pieces of smoked rabbit. She added fresh vegetables, wild herbs, and clean water. Soon the pot began to boil. The rich aroma filled the air. Obinna watched quietly. "You cook every day?" "Only if I catch something." "What happens if you don't?" "I sleep hungry." Her answer was calm. She wasn't asking for pity. She was simply telling the truth. Obinna felt something tighten inside his chest. He had attended expensive dinners where thousands of naira were spent on food people barely touched. Meanwhile, this young woman accepted hunger as part of life. After a while, Ada served the soup in a wooden bowl. She handed it to him. "Careful. It's hot." Obinna tasted it. His eyes widened. "This is delicious." Ada smiled shyly. "I'm glad. I've eaten in five-star hotels." She looked confused. "I don't know what that means." He chuckled. "It means I've eaten food prepared by famous chefs." And he took another spoonful. "I honestly think this tastes better." Ada laughed. "I think hunger is helping the flavor." "Maybe." For several minutes they ate in comfortable silence. After dinner, Ada poured fresh water into a wooden cup. "Drink." He finished it gratefully. "I owe you my life." "You don't owe me anything. You saved me. You needed help. Many people would have ignored me." She shrugged. "My parents taught me something before they died." "What was that?" "If you have the strength to help someone, then help." Her voice became quieter. They believed kindness always finds its way back. Obinna stared into the fire. His own father had taught him something similar many years ago. For a moment, he felt as though fate had brought him here for a reason. Curious, he asked gently, "How long have you lived here?" "About 10 years." "Alone?" "Yes." "Weren't you afraid?" "I was at first." "What changed?" She smiled softly. "The forest became my friend." Obinna looked around again. He realized she wasn't complaining about her life. She wasn't bitter. Despite owning almost nothing, she carried herself with quiet confidence. He admired that. The fire crackled between them. The night grew cooler. Ada stood. "You should sleep." "What about you?" "I'll keep the fire burning." "You've already done enough." She smiled. "Rest." She spread another animal skin over a bed made of dry grass inside the shelter. "It's not soft," she said apologetically. Obinna looked around. "It looks perfect." He lay down. Although it was the simplest bed he had ever seen, exhaustion quickly took over. Before closing his eyes, he looked toward Ada. She sat outside the shelter beside the fire, quietly sharpening one of her hunting arrows while listening to the sounds of the forest. She looked peaceful, strong, completely at home. Obinna smiled to himself. He still had no idea that she was homeless. She still had no idea that the tired stranger sleeping in her shelter owned one of the biggest construction companies in Nigeria. Neither of them asked about wealth. Neither of them cared about status. Tonight, they were simply two strangers brought together by fate. As the fire burned gently beneath the starlit Enugu sky, the first seeds of an extraordinary friendship were quietly planted. Neither Ada nor Obinna realized that this unexpected meeting in the heart of the forest would soon grow into a love story that would surprise everyone who heard it. The first rays of sunlight slipped through the tall trees and gently entered Ada's small shelter. Birds chirped happily from the branches above, and the cool morning breeze carried the fresh scent of wet leaves. After the heavy rain the previous day, the forest looked cleaner than ever. Tiny drops of water sparkled on every leaf like little diamonds. Obinna slowly opened his eyes. For a few seconds, he stared at the roof made from palm leaves and bamboo, trying to remember where he was. Then everything came back to him. The forest, the storm, getting lost, and the brave young hunter who had rescued him. He sat up and looked around. The shelter was simple, but it was neat. Every item had its own place. There were clay pots stacked in one corner, bundles of dry firewood tied together, and a handmade wooden shelf holding a few cooking utensils. He smiled to himself. "I actually slept well," he whispered. It surprised him. His mansion in Lagos had one of the most expensive beds money could buy, yet many nights he struggled to sleep because of stress and endless business meetings. But here, on a bed made of dry grass and animal skins, he had slept peacefully. He stepped outside. The morning air felt cool against his skin. Ada was already awake. She stood near the stream washing vegetables she had gathered earlier. Her long black hair was tied neatly behind her head, and the early sunlight highlighted her strong shoulders and muscular arms. She looked up and smiled. "Good morning. Good morning. You slept well." "I did. I'm glad." She pointed toward a wooden stool. "Sit. Breakfast is almost ready." Obinna obeyed. He watched as Ada placed a clay pot over the fire. She added fresh water, chopped vegetables, and small pieces of smoked meat. The delicious smell quickly filled the air. "You wake up very early," Obinna said. Ada nodded. "The forest wakes up early." "So do you always start your day like this?" "Every day." She stirred the pot slowly. "If I wake up late, the animals disappear deeper into the forest." Obinna smiled. "My mornings are very different." "What do you usually do?" "I normally wake up to phone calls." She looked confused. "So early?" "Sometimes before sunrise." "Why?" He laughed softly. "Business never sleeps." Ada shook her head. "I don't think I would enjoy that." "Honestly." He looked around at the peaceful forest. "I'm beginning to think neither do I." Ada served breakfast in 2 wooden bowls. It was a simple meal made from vegetables, smoked meat, and roasted yam. Obinna took one bite. "As usual," he said with a smile. "It's delicious." Ada laughed. "You keep saying that." "Because it's true." After breakfast, Ada stood and picked up her bow. "I have to check my traps." Obinna looked at her. "May I come with you?" She hesitated. "You've never walked through a forest like this." "I'll be careful." She studied him for a moment before smiling. "All right." Together they began walking deeper into the forest. The sunlight filtered through the tall trees, creating beautiful patterns on the ground. As they walked, Ada pointed toward different plants. "This one is medicine." She gently touched a leafy plant. "If someone has a fever, we boil these leaves." A few steps later she pointed at another plant. "Never eat those berries." "Why?" "They're poisonous." Obinna listened carefully. "You know so much." Ada smiled. "The forest teaches those who pay attention." After walking for nearly 30 minutes, they reached one of Ada's traps. It was empty. She wasn't disappointed. Not every trap catches something. They continued to the next one. This time a rabbit had been caught. Ada thanked the animal quietly before removing it from the trap. Obinna watched with curiosity. "I noticed you always say thank you." Ada nodded. "My father taught me that." "Why?" "He said every life deserves respect." Obinna lowered his eyes. "Your father sounds like a wise man." "He was." She smiled sadly. "I still miss him." "So do I." "My father?" "Yes." "When did he die?" 5 years ago." "I'm sorry." "So am I." For a while they walked in silence. The conversation about their parents had brought back memories for both of them. Suddenly Ada stopped. She raised one hand. "Listen." Obinna remained still. At first he heard nothing. Then, rustle. Something moved through the bushes. Ada slowly reached for an arrow. She whispered, "Stay behind me." Obina did exactly as she said. A moment later, a large antelope stepped into a small clearing. It hadn't noticed them. Ada moved with incredible patience. She carefully lifted her bow. She pulled back the string. Everything became still. Even the birds seemed to stop singing. Then, whoosh, the arrow flew through the air. The antelope jumped once before collapsing. Obina stared in amazement. That was incredible. Ada smiled. Years of practice. He walked closer. I've never seen anyone hunt before. She knelt beside the animal. My father used to say hunting isn't about strength. What is it about? Patience. She looked up. And respect. Together they carried the antelope toward her shelter. Although it was heavy, Ada carried most of the weight. Obina laughed. I think you're stronger than I am. She grinned. I told you. You certainly did. When they reached the shelter, Ada immediately began preparing the meat. She separated what she would eat. The rest she carefully smoked over the fire to preserve it. You waste nothing, Obina observed. Nothing. What about the skin? I use it for bedding. The bones. Sometimes I make tools. The horns. I sell them. Obina nodded slowly. Everything had a purpose. Nothing was thrown away. He admired her resourcefulness. Later that afternoon, Ada noticed that part of her shelter's roof had been damaged by the previous night storm. A section of dried palm leaves hung loosely. I need to fix that. Without thinking, Obina stood. I'll help. She looked surprised. You know how? Not really. She laughed. I guessed as much. Still, she showed him what to do. Hand me those leaves. He passed them to her. No, not those. Oh, the longer ones. He searched again. These? Yes. She smiled. You're learning. For the next 2 hours, they worked together. Obina tied ropes incorrectly several times. He accidentally dropped a bundle of leaves. At one point, he nearly slipped off a wooden ladder. Ada couldn't stop laughing. You'd never survive 1 week living here. I believe you. I've had to rescue you 3 times today. I've lost count. She laughed even harder. It had been a long time since she had laughed so freely. Obina found himself laughing with her. Felt good. There were no business meetings. No expensive suits. No people pretending to impress him. Just honest work and genuine laughter. By late afternoon, the shelter looked much better. Ada stepped back to admire it. Not bad. Obina wiped sweat from his forehead. I think you did 90% of the work. 95. They both laughed again. As evening approached, Ada gathered some dry wood for the fire. Obina decided to help. He picked up a large log. After carrying it only a short distance, he stopped to catch his breath. Ada walked past carrying 3 even larger logs with ease. He stared at her. You've embarrassed me. She smiled mischievously. I warned you. You certainly did. The sun slowly disappeared behind the hills. Orange light filled the forest. After dinner, they sat beside the fire watching the dancing flames. For a while, neither of them spoke. The silence felt comfortable. Finally, Obina asked, Don't you ever feel lonely? Ada looked toward the stars beginning to appear above them. Sometimes. What do you do then? I talk. To who? She pointed upward. To God. She smiled softly. And sometimes. She looked around the forest. I talk to the trees. Obina chuckled. Do they answer? They listen. He smiled. I suppose that's enough. Ada turned toward him. What about you? What about me? You're always surrounded by people, aren't you? Obina thought carefully before answering. Yes. So you're never lonely? He looked into the fire. Sometimes being surrounded by people can make you feel even more alone. Ada frowned slightly. I don't understand. Many people stay close because they want something. She nodded slowly. I've seen that in the villages. They smile when they need help. And afterwards? They disappear. Ada looked at him kindly. That must hurt. It does. She didn't ask any more questions. She simply nodded with understanding. For some reason, Obina found it easy to talk to her. She never interrupted. She never judged. She simply listened. Night slowly covered the forest. The stars shone brightly above them. A gentle breeze moved through the trees. As Obina looked around the peaceful forest, he realized something unexpected. For the first time in years, he wasn't thinking about company profits, business contracts, or endless meetings. Instead, he was thinking about a strong young hunter who lived in a tiny shelter yet smiled more often than many wealthy people he knew. He admired her courage, her kindness, her honesty, her strength. Ada, on the other hand, quietly watched the stranger sitting beside the fire. There was something different about him. He was polite. He never acted as though he was better than anyone. He was curious about everything. Most importantly, he treated her with respect. She didn't know who he really was. She only knew that somehow, this stranger from another world had become someone she enjoyed spending time with. Neither of them realized it yet. But with every conversation, every shared meal, every laugh, and every moment spent together beneath the trees of Enugu, the distance between their hearts was growing smaller. The forest that had brought them together was quietly weaving a bond that neither wealth nor poverty could break. The morning sun rose gently over the forest, sending warm golden light through the tall trees. Birds flew from one branch to another while the cool breeze carried the sweet smell of flowers and fresh leaves. Ada stepped out of her small shelter before sunrise as she always did. She stretched her arms and smiled. "Thank you, Lord, for another day," she whispered. It had become her daily habit. No matter how difficult life became, she always found something to be thankful for. She turned toward the small fireplace. To her surprise, Obina was already awake. He was sitting on a wooden stool, trying to light the fire with 2 dry sticks. Ada watched quietly for a moment before laughing. "You've been sitting there for a while, haven't you?" Obina looked up and smiled sheepishly. "I wanted to surprise you." "You certainly surprised me. But I can't seem to make this fire." Ada walked over. "You need dry grass first. I thought these sticks would be enough." "They won't." She gathered a handful of dry grass from a basket nearby and placed it beneath the sticks. Then she struck 2 small stones together. Within seconds, tiny sparks landed on the grass. A thin line of smoke appeared. Moments later, a warm flame danced beneath the firewood. Obina stared in amazement. "You make it look so easy." Ada smiled. "I've done it almost every day for 10 years. I still have a lot to learn." She handed him another piece of firewood. "Then today you begin." They laughed together. Soon breakfast was ready. Ada roasted fresh yam over the fire and served it with vegetables and smoked meat. As they ate, Obina looked around. "You really do everything yourself." "I have to. Don't you ever wish someone could help you?" Ada thought for a moment. "Sometimes." "Then why don't you move to the village?" She smiled gently. "I've tried." "What happened?" "Some people were kind." "And the others?" "They looked at me like I didn't belong." Obina frowned. "Why?" "Because I was poor." Her answer was calm. She had accepted the truth long ago. Obina looked down at his food. Saddened him. He had spent years creating businesses that employed thousands of people, yet there were still people like Ada struggling to survive alone. After breakfast, Ada stood. "I need to gather fruits today." "I'll come." She smiled. "I knew you would." Together they walked deeper into the forest. The air was cool beneath the tall trees. As they walked, Ada pointed toward different fruit trees. "Those yellow fruits are sweet." "What about the red ones?" "Never eat them." "They're poisonous?" "They'll make you very sick." Obina nodded. "I'll remember." "You'd better." She laughed. "I don't want to carry you back again." "I've become that much trouble?" She pretended to think carefully. "A little. A little. Maybe a lot." Both of them burst into laughter. The forest no longer felt lonely. For the first time in many years, Ada enjoyed having someone beside her. When they reached a tall mango tree, Ada looked up. "The fruits are ready." Obina searched for a branch. "I'll climb." Ada crossed her arms. You? I used to climb trees as a boy. She smiled. Let's see. Obina grabbed the trunk and slowly began climbing. For a few seconds everything went well. Then, crunch! A small branch snapped beneath his foot. Whoa! He quickly hugged the tree before falling. Ada laughed so hard that tears formed in her eyes. You said you used to climb. I did. When I was 12. She laughed even harder. That explains everything. Trying to save his pride, Obina finally reached a low branch and picked 3 mangoes. He climbed down carefully. There. Ada accepted the fruits with a smile. I'm impressed. You are. I honestly didn't think you'd make it. He laughed. I'll take that as a compliment. They spent the next hour gathering fruits and wild vegetables. As they worked, Obina noticed how Ada treated every part of the forest with respect. She never broke unnecessary branches. She never picked more fruits than she needed. She even scattered a few fruits on the ground. Why did you do that? He asked. For the animals. You leave food for them? She nodded. They also live here. Obina smiled. You have a very kind heart. Ada shrugged. We all share this forest. On their way back, they heard soft crying. Ada immediately stopped. Did you hear that? Obina nodded. The sound came from behind a cluster of bushes. Together they walked closer. There they found a small boy sitting on the ground. He looked no older than 8 years old. His clothes were dusty, and tears rolled down his cheeks. Ada knelt beside him. What's wrong? I can't find my mother. The boy sniffed loudly. We came to gather firewood. And then, I wandered away. Ada smiled gently. Don't be afraid. We'll help you. The little boy wiped his tears. Really? Of course. Obina smiled warmly. We won't leave you alone. Ada looked around carefully. She examined the ground. Fresh footprints. Broken grass. A few pieces of chopped firewood. She followed the signs. Obina watched with amazement. You can actually track people. She nodded. The forest always leaves clues. After nearly 40 minutes of walking, they heard a woman shouting. Chica! The little boy's face lit up. Mama! He ran toward the voice. A worried woman rushed out from the trees and hugged him tightly. My son! She cried with relief. I thought I had lost you. The woman looked at Ada and Obina. Thank you. Ada smiled. He only wandered a little too far. The grateful mother reached into her wrapper and pulled out a small amount of money. Please accept this. Ada shook her head. No. You helped my son. That's enough. The woman insisted. Ada gently pushed her hand back. Use it to buy food for your family. The woman could hardly believe it. May God bless you. Amen. Ada replied. As they walked away, Obina looked at her. You refused the money again. It wasn't necessary. You could have used it. She smiled. They needed it more. Obina remained silent. Every hour he spent with Ada revealed another reason to admire her. Back at the shelter, the afternoon sun shone brightly overhead. While Ada cleaned the vegetables, Obina noticed one of her wooden shelves leaning dangerously. It might fall. I know. I'll fix it. She looked doubtful. Are you sure? I've learned a little. She handed him a few simple tools. He carefully tightened the ropes holding the shelf together. It wasn't perfect. One side leaned slightly. Ada looked at it and smiled. It's better. Obina laughed. You're trying not to hurt my feelings. Maybe. But at least it won't fall anymore. That's true. She nodded approvingly. Good job. For some reason, those simple words made Obina happier than receiving praise during expensive business meetings. Later that evening, after dinner, they sat beside the fire. The stars filled the sky above them. The forest was peaceful. Obina looked thoughtfully into the flames. Ada? Yes. Can I ask you something? You already are. He laughed. I suppose I am. She smiled. What is it? What makes you happy? Ada thought quietly. The sunrise. He looked surprised. The sunrise. She nodded. The sound of birds. She continued counting on her fingers. A good hunt. Helping someone. A full stomach. A peaceful night's sleep. She smiled again. And seeing children laugh. Obinna listened carefully. Those are simple things. They're enough. He looked toward the stars. When I became successful, I thought happiness came from bigger houses, more cars, more money. And did it? He remained silent for a long moment. No. Ada looked at him kindly. Maybe you were looking in the wrong place. Her words stayed in his heart. Nobody had ever said something so simple yet so true. After another moment of silence, Ada spoke. My turn. Go ahead. What makes you happy? Obinna smiled. I don't think anyone has asked me that in years. So? He looked at the fire. I used to think closing a business deal made me happy. And now? He slowly turned toward her. I'm beginning to realize that sharing a meal beside a campfire can be worth much more. Ada smiled softly. Neither of them noticed the meaning hidden in those words. Their friendship had become something special. There were no lies between them, no pride, no selfishness, just two people from completely different worlds learning to trust each other. As the fire crackled gently beneath the stars of Enugu, Obinna realized he had laughed more during the last 3 days than he had during the previous 3 years. Ada realized something too. For the first time since losing her parents, she no longer felt completely alone. Neither of them spoke about love. Neither of them understood what was quietly happening inside their hearts. But somewhere between the shared meals, the laughter, the long walks through the forest, and the quiet conversations beneath the stars, a beautiful friendship had begun. And that friendship was slowly growing into something much deeper than either of them could yet imagine. The morning was unusually quiet. A thin blanket of mist floated between the tall trees as the first rays of sunlight touched the forest. Birds flew from branch to branch, singing cheerful songs, while the cool breeze gently moved the leaves. Ada stood outside her shelter sharpening one of her hunting arrows. Nearby, Obinna was trying to cut firewood with a small axe. He raised the axe confidently. This shouldn't be too difficult, he said. Ada smiled without looking up. Be careful. I've watched you do it many times. Watching and doing are different. Obinna laughed. I'll be fine. He swung the axe. Instead of hitting the center of the log, the blade landed on the edge. The axe bounced backward. Obinna quickly stepped away before it could hit his foot. Ada burst into laughter. I warned you. He rubbed the back of his neck. I think the log moved. Ada raised an eyebrow. The log moved. Yes. It decided not to cooperate. She laughed even harder. I've never met a stubborn log before. Obinna couldn't help laughing too. I suppose I deserved that. Ada walked over and gently took the axe from him. Watch. She placed the log upright. With one smooth swing, the wood split neatly into 2 pieces. There. Obinna clapped dramatically. You're making me look bad. You don't need my help for that. He placed a hand over his chest. That hurt. She grinned. I know. The two of them laughed together. For the past few days, the forest had become filled with their laughter. Neither of them noticed how naturally they had grown comfortable around each other. After breakfast, Ada packed a small basket. I'm going to collect medicinal herbs. I'll come. She smiled. I expected that answer. Together they walked deeper into the forest. As they passed through the trees, Ada suddenly stopped. She looked down at the muddy ground. What is it? Obinna asked. She knelt. There are footprints. Animal? She shook her head. People. Obinna looked carefully but couldn't understand what she saw. Can you tell how many? Several. How? She pointed at the ground. Different shoe sizes. She looked toward the west. They came from that direction. Obinna became curious. Maybe villagers? Ada wasn't sure. They don't usually come this deep. At that very moment, several kilometers away, Obinna's security team continued searching desperately. 3 black SUVs slowly drove along a rough road near the forest. Inside one of the vehicles sat Chinidu, Obinna's personal assistant. His face showed clear signs of worry. It's been 4 days. he said quietly. The head of security nodded. We've searched everywhere. The police, they're helping. The local hunters, they're searching too. Chinedu sighed deeply. If anything happens to him, he couldn't finish the sentence. Obinna wasn't only his employer. Over the years, they had become close friends. The convoy stopped beside a small village. An elderly hunter approached them. You are still looking for that missing man? Yes, Chinedu replied. The old hunter pointed toward the forest. I saw fresh footprints yesterday. The security officers exchanged hopeful looks. Can you show us? The old hunter nodded. I'll take you. Back in the forest, Ada and Obinna returned to the shelter carrying several medicinal plants. Ada spread the herbs beneath the sun to dry. Obinna watched carefully. What are these used for? This one helps fever. She picked up another leaf. This one stops bleeding. And this, she smiled. It helps stomach pain. You know so much. My mother taught me before she died. Obinna smiled gently. She must have been an amazing woman. She was. For a moment, sadness crossed Ada's face. She missed her parents every day. But she had learned to carry the pain quietly. As the afternoon sun climbed higher, Obinna decided to fetch water from the nearby stream. I'll be back. Don't get lost. He laughed. I think I've learned my lesson. She smiled. I hope so. While Obinna walked toward the stream, faint voices echoed through the forest. At first he thought he was imagining them. Then he heard them again. Sir, Mr. Obinna. He froze. That voice, it sounded familiar. Sir. His eyes widened. Chinedu. The shouting became louder. Mr. Obinna. Without thinking, Obinna ran toward the voices. Branches brushed against his arms as he pushed through the bushes. Then he saw them. Several security officers, police officers, local hunters, and standing in front of them, Chinedu. For a second, everyone simply stared. Then Chinedu shouted, Sir! He ran forward and hugged Obinna tightly. Thank God! We found you! Several security officers sighed with relief. One of them wiped tears from his eyes. We've been searching everywhere. Another officer smiled broadly. We thought. He stopped speaking. The emotion was too overwhelming. Obinna smiled warmly. I'm all right. Chinedu stepped back and looked at him. His expensive clothes were worn. His shoes were scratched. His face carried a short beard. Yet he looked healthier and happier than he had in months. What happened to you? Chinedu asked. I got lost. We know. But how did you survive? Obinna smiled. Someone saved me. At that moment, Ada arrived carrying the wooden water container. She stopped when she saw the crowd. Nearly 20 people stood outside her shelter. Luxury vehicles were visible through the trees. Several men wore expensive suits. Others carried communication radios. Everyone looked toward her. Chinedu frowned. Who is she? Obinna smiled. This is Ada. He walked toward her. Ada. He hesitated. I need to tell you something. She looked confused. What is it? Before he could answer, one of the security officers spoke. Sir, the governor has been calling non-stop. Another added, the media has reported your disappearance. The board members are waiting. Everyone is worried. Ada looked from one face to another, then back at Obinna. They're calling you, sir. He nodded slowly. Yes. What do they mean? There was a long silence. Finally, Obinna took a deep breath. My full name is Obinna Okeke. She smiled politely. That's your name? Yes. I'm also the owner of Okeke Construction Group. Ada blinked. She had heard villagers mention that company. The Billionaire? Obinna lowered his head. Yes. Silence. The words hung in the air. Ada looked at the luxury vehicles, the expensive clothes, the security officers. Everything suddenly made sense. His watch, his phone, his manners, the stories he never fully explained. He hadn't been an ordinary traveler. He was one of the richest men in Nigeria. She slowly stepped backward. You! Her voice became barely a whisper. You never told me. I wanted to. But I was afraid. Afraid. I thought if you knew who I was. He smiled sadly. You might treat me differently. Ada couldn't find any words. She had shared meals with him, laughed with him, teased him. She had never imagined he was a billionaire. She looked down at her worn clothes, then at her little shelter made from branches. Embarrassment filled her heart. I'm sorry. Obina frowned. Sorry for what? I didn't know. You don't need to apologize. I made you carry firewood. He laughed softly. I enjoyed it. I laughed at you. I deserved it. I made you sleep here. I'm grateful you did. She looked away. But, she swallowed hard. Our worlds are completely different. Obina stepped closer. Ada. No. She gently shook her head. You belong in cities. She looked toward the luxury SUVs. That's your life. Then she looked at her tiny shelter. This is mine. He tried to speak, but she continued. You should go. I don't want to leave like this. Your people need you. He looked into her eyes. I'll come back. She forced a small smile. You don't have to say that. I mean it. She nodded politely, but deep inside, she didn't believe him. Why would a billionaire return for a homeless hunter? It sounded impossible. Chinedu quietly approached Obina. Sir. Obina looked back once more. Ada stood silently beside her shelter. The cheerful young woman who had laughed with him every day now looked distant. He wanted to explain everything. He wanted to tell her that those few days in the forest had become some of the happiest days of his life. But this wasn't the right moment. Slowly, he walked toward the waiting vehicles. Before entering the SUV, he turned around one last time. Ada was still standing there. The wind gently moved her hair. Their eyes met across the clearing. Neither of them spoke. Neither of them smiled. The SUV doors closed. The convoy slowly drove away. The sound of the engines faded deeper into the distance until silence returned to the forest. Ada remained standing long after the vehicles disappeared. The place suddenly felt empty, far emptier than it had ever felt before. She looked at the wooden stool where Obina used to sit every morning, the half-finished pile of firewood he had tried to split, the repaired shelf inside her shelter, little reminders of the stranger who had unexpectedly become her friend. She sighed softly. I hope you have a good life, Obina. Then she picked up her bow and slowly walked toward the forest. She told herself she would forget him. She told herself that billionaires and homeless hunters could never belong together. But no matter how hard she tried to convince herself, she couldn't stop thinking about him. And several kilometers away, inside the luxury SUV speeding back toward Enugu, Obina stared silently out the window. His company had found him. His old life was waiting. Yet, for the first time since becoming one of Nigeria's wealthiest men, his heart wasn't in the city. It was still in a small forest shelter beside a brave young hunter named Ada. The black SUV sped along the highway leading back to Enugu City. Inside the vehicle, the air conditioner hummed softly, but Obina barely noticed it. He sat quietly by the window, watching the trees and villages pass by. Only a few hours earlier, he had been sitting beside a small campfire in Ada's forest shelter. Now he was surrounded once again by luxury. Leather seats, tinted windows, bodyguards, expensive watches. Everything that had once felt normal suddenly seemed strange. Chinedu glanced at him several times. Sir. Obina looked up. Yes. Is everything all right? Obina forced a small smile. I'm fine. But Chinedu knew better. He had worked with Obina for nearly 8 years. Whenever his boss answered with only 2 words, something was usually bothering him. You've hardly spoken since we left the forest. I'm just thinking. About the project? Obina slowly shook his head. No. The company? No. Chinedu smiled knowingly. The hunter. Obina looked at him in surprise. You noticed. It was impossible not to. He laughed softly. I've never seen you look at anyone the way you looked at her. Obina looked back through the window. Ada is different. In what way? She never cared about who I was. Chinedu nodded. She didn't even know. Exactly. Obina sighed. She helped me because I was hungry, not because I was rich. She laughed with me. She argued with me. She treated me like an ordinary person. A smile slowly appeared on his face. It felt real. Chinedu smiled. I've never heard you talk like this. Before Obina could answer, his phone began ringing. The screen showed more than 50 missed calls. He sighed. Reality has returned. He answered. Hello. Immediately, the voice of the company's chairman filled the phone. Obina, thank God you're alive. I'm fine. Do you know how worried everyone has been? I'm sorry. The entire board has gathered. We've postponed several meetings. The media has been asking questions. I'll be there soon. We're waiting. The call ended. Before he could put the phone away, another call came. Then another. And another. Government officials. Business partners. Friends. Journalists. Everyone wanted to know what had happened. By the time they reached Enugu City, Obina already felt exhausted. His peaceful days in the forest suddenly seemed very far away. At the headquarters of Okeke Construction Group, hundreds of employees waited outside the building. The moment Obina's SUV entered the compound, loud cheers filled the air. He's back. Our CEO is safe. Employees clapped happily. Some even wiped tears from their eyes. Obina stepped out of the vehicle. Everyone rushed toward him. Welcome back, sir. We're so happy you're safe. We've been praying for you. Obina smiled warmly and greeted everyone. Thank you. I appreciate your concern. Despite the warm welcome, his thoughts kept drifting back to Ada. He wondered if she had eaten. He wondered if she was safe. He wondered if she was thinking about him too. Later that afternoon, the boardroom was filled with important people. Directors, lawyers, project managers, financial advisors. Everyone looked relieved. The chairman stood. We thank God for bringing our CEO back safely. The room erupted into applause. After the meeting began, one director spoke. We need to improve security. Another nodded. Sir should never walk alone again. Everyone agreed. Obina listened quietly. When the meeting finally ended, he walked into his large office. Everything looked exactly as he had left it. The polished wooden desk, the expensive paintings, the soft leather chair, the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Enugu. It was beautiful, yet somehow, it felt empty. He opened one of the desk drawers. Inside lay a silver pen worth more than Ada's entire shelter. He stared at it, then quietly closed the drawer. Money suddenly felt less important than before. Meanwhile, deep inside the forest, Ada returned to her normal routine. Before sunrise the next morning, she carried her bow and walked toward her hunting grounds. Everything looked the same. The trees, the birds, the stream, but something had changed. The forest no longer felt as peaceful. She reached the spot where she and Obina had laughed while trying to gather mangoes. A small smile appeared on her face. Then it disappeared. He has probably forgotten me already, she whispered. She shook her head firmly. No, I shouldn't think about him. She continued walking, but every few minutes another memory appeared. Obina trying to light the fire. Obina failing to split firewood. Obina laughing after falling while climbing the tree. Without realizing it, she smiled. Then she sighed. This is foolish. Later that day, Ada carried fresh meat to the nearby village. The villagers greeted her warmly. Ada, good afternoon. She smiled politely. As she sold the meat, she overheard two men talking excitedly. Did you hear? The billionaire has been found. Yes. They say he survived in the forest for several days. I heard local hunters helped him. Another man laughed. He'll never return there again. Why would he? People like him belong in mansions. Ada quietly lowered her head. She paid for her bag of salt and started walking home. The words stayed in her heart. People like him belong in mansions. People like me belong in the forest. Maybe that was simply the truth. Several days passed. Back in Enugu City, Obina tried to return to his normal life. But nothing felt normal anymore. During one meeting, an executive presented colorful charts explaining projected profits. "Sir." Obina didn't answer. "Sir." Chinedu gently touched his shoulder. The presentation." "Oh, I'm sorry." The executive smiled nervously. "Should I continue?" "Yes." But even as the presentation continued, Obina's mind wandered. Instead of thinking about construction contracts, he remembered Ada teaching him how to identify medicinal plants. During lunch, expensive dishes were served. Imported rice, grilled fish, fresh salads, delicious desserts. Obina took one bite, then quietly pushed the plate away. Chinedu noticed. "You don't like the food? It's good. Then why aren't you eating?" Obina smiled sadly. "I miss roasted yam." Chinedu laughed. "I never thought I'd hear our billionaire CEO say that." That evening, Obina visited his family home. His mother hugged him tightly. "My son." "I'm all right, Mama. I was so worried." "I know." His younger sister, Chioma, smiled mischievously. "So?" Obina looked at her. "So? I heard there was a beautiful hunter." He looked surprised. "Who told you?" "Chinedu." Obina made a mental note to deal with his talkative assistant later. His sister laughed. "So it's true." He smiled. "Yes." "What is she like?" Obina sat quietly for a moment. Then he answered honestly. "She's brave, kind, strong. She smiles with her whole heart." His mother listened carefully. "You care about her?" Obina nodded slowly. "I do." His mother smiled warmly. "Then bring her home." He sighed. "It's not that simple." "Why?" "She thinks we're too different." His mother placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. "Real love has never cared about money." Far away in the forest, Ada sat beside the campfire that night. The empty wooden stool opposite her caught her attention. That was where Obina used to sit every evening. Without thinking, she prepared 2 wooden cups for drinking water. Then she stopped. She quietly put one cup away. A sad smile crossed her face. "What am I doing?" She looked up at the stars. The same stars stretched across the sky above Enugu City. She wondered if Obina was looking at them too. At that exact moment, in his luxurious bedroom overlooking the city, Obina stood on his balcony. He looked toward the dark hills where the forest lay hidden. "Ada!" He whispered her name softly. Then he made a decision. He could no longer pretend nothing had changed. Money had never solved loneliness. Success had never filled the emptiness in his heart. But a few days spent beside a campfire with a homeless hunter had shown him a happiness he had been searching for all his life. He turned toward the room. "Chinedu!" His assistant hurried inside. "Yes, sir?" "Tomorrow morning." "Yes. We're going back to the forest." Chinedu smiled. "I was hoping you'd say that." Obina looked once more toward the distant forest. This time he wasn't going as a billionaire inspecting land. He wasn't going as a businessman. He was going as a man following his heart. Because no matter how many people told him they belonged to different worlds, his heart refused to believe it. And somewhere beneath the tall trees outside Enugu, Ada unknowingly waited for the man who was determined to prove that true love was worth fighting for. The first light of dawn spread across Enugu, covering the hills and valleys with a soft golden glow. Inside his large mansion, Obina had already been awake for more than an hour. He stood on the balcony with a cup of coffee in his hand, but he had barely taken a sip. His eyes were fixed on the distant hills where the forest stretched as far as he could see. That forest no longer looked like an ordinary piece of land. It was where he had discovered peace. It was where he had laughed without pretending. Most importantly, it was where he had met Ada. He smiled as he remembered her laughing when he failed to split a log with an axe. He could almost hear her voice. The log decided not to cooperate. He laughed quietly to himself. No one had ever teased him so naturally. His thoughts were interrupted by a knock on the door. "Come in." Chinedu entered carrying a notebook. "Good morning, sir." "Good morning. You asked me to prepare for the trip." "I did. Everything is ready." Obina nodded. Let's leave immediately. Chinedu hesitated. Sir, may I ask something? Go ahead. What exactly is the plan? Obina looked toward the forest once more. I'm going to find Ada, and then I'll tell her the truth. You already told her you're a billionaire. I told her who I am. He sighed. But I never told her how much she changed my life. Chinedu smiled. I think she'll be happy to hear that. I hope so. Within minutes, 2 black SUVs left the mansion. Unlike the previous convoy, this one was much smaller. Obina didn't want unnecessary attention. As they drove through Enugu, the city slowly came to life. Market traders arranged fresh vegetables. School children walked along the roadside wearing neat uniforms. Commercial buses picked up passengers. Everything looked busy, but Obina's thoughts remained fixed on the forest. Meanwhile, deep inside the forest, Ada was already hunting. She moved silently between the trees, her bow resting comfortably in her hands. She stopped beside a narrow stream and carefully examined the muddy ground. Fresh animal tracks. She smiled. You're close. She quietly followed the footprints. After a few minutes, she spotted 2 rabbits feeding near a bush. She slowly raised her bow. She waited. Her breathing became slow and steady. Then, whoosh, the arrow flew through the air. One rabbit was caught immediately. The other disappeared into the bushes. Ada walked over and picked up the rabbit. Thank you, she whispered softly. She placed it inside her basket before continuing her journey. Although she tried to focus on hunting, her thoughts kept drifting back to Obina. She wondered whether he had returned safely. She wondered whether he had gone back to his busy life. She sighed. He has probably forgotten all about me. She shook her head firmly. I should stop thinking about him. But no matter how hard she tried, she couldn't. Back on the road leading toward the forest, Chinedu looked through the vehicle's windshield. Sir. Yes. What if we don't find her? Obina smiled confidently. We will. The forest is huge. I know. You only stayed there a few days. I remember the way. Chinedu wasn't so sure. The forest seemed endless. Every path looked the same. Every tree looked alike. But Obina's determination never changed. By mid-morning, they reached the edge of the forest. The vehicles stopped. The security officers stepped out. One of them spoke. Sir, we'll accompany you. Obina shook his head. Only Chinedu is coming. Sir. I'll be fine. The officer reluctantly nodded. Please be careful. Obina and Chinedu entered the forest on foot. The fresh air immediately surrounded them. Birds sang overhead. Sunlight filtered through the tall trees. Obina smiled. It feels good to be back. Chinedu laughed. I never thought I'd hear our CEO say he prefers the forest. Obina grinned. Neither did I. As they walked, Obina recognized several places. There. He pointed toward a fallen tree. I slipped there. A few minutes later, he smiled again. That's where Ada showed me the medicinal plants. Chinedu looked around with curiosity. She really taught you a lot. More than she realizes. They continued walking. After nearly an hour, they reached the small clearing. Obina's heart began beating faster. Ada, he called gently. No answer. He walked toward the shelter. It stood exactly where he remembered. But something felt different. The fire had gone out. The wooden stool was empty. No one was there. Ada? Silence. Obina looked around carefully. The shelter was clean, but Ada was nowhere to be seen. He smiled hopefully. She's probably hunting. Chinedu nodded. We can wait. So they sat outside the shelter. An hour passed. Then another. The afternoon sun climbed higher. Still no sign of Ada. Finally, Obina stood. I'll look for her. Ada was several kilometers away, following the tracks of a small antelope. She had traveled farther than usual that day. The animal moved quickly through thick bushes. Ada patiently followed. She had no idea that someone was waiting for her at the shelter. Back at the shelter, Obina searched nearby paths. Ada! His voice echoed through the trees. No answer. Again he called. Ada! Only birds replied. After another hour, he returned to the shelter. Chinedu could see the disappointment on his face. "We'll find her." Obina nodded quietly. "I know." Just then, an elderly hunter appeared along the narrow path. He carried a bundle of firewood over one shoulder. When he noticed the strangers, he smiled politely. "Good afternoon." "Good afternoon," Obina replied. "Do you know the young hunter who lives here?" The old man smiled. "You mean Ada?" "Yes. I know her well." Hope immediately returned to Obina's face. "Where is she?" "She left before sunrise." "Do you know where she went?" The old hunter scratched his chin. "Hunting. Will she return soon?" He nodded. "Before sunset." Obina smiled. "Thank you." The old hunter studied him for a moment. "You must be the man she rescued." Obina looked surprised. "She told you?" "She didn't say much." He laughed softly. "But she smiled while talking about you." Obina felt warmth spread through his heart. "She smiled." The old hunter nodded. "I've known Ada for many years. She rarely talks about herself. But after you left," he smiled knowingly, "she became very quiet." Obina lowered his eyes. "I think I hurt her." The old hunter shook his head gently. "No. She was simply afraid." "Afraid?" "She believes rich people and poor people can never share the same life." Obina sighed. "I want to prove her wrong." The old hunter smiled. "Then don't give up." As the afternoon slowly faded, Ada finally began walking back toward her shelter. Her basket was filled with fresh meat, wild fruits, and vegetables. She felt tired but satisfied. The hunt had been successful. As she approached the clearing, she noticed footprints. Fresh footprints. She stopped immediately. Someone had been there. She carefully examined the ground. 2 people. One pair of expensive shoes. The other slightly smaller. Her heart began beating faster. She quietly reached for her bow. Slowly, she walked toward the shelter. Then she heard a familiar voice. "I hope she comes back." She froze. Her eyes widened. That voice. She knew it. She stepped out from behind the trees. Obina looked up. For a second, neither of them moved. Then a smile slowly spread across his face. "Ada." She stood silently, unable to believe what she was seeing. "You came back." "I promised I would." She looked at him for several long seconds. "I didn't think you meant it." "I did. I thought." She looked down. "You had forgotten me." Obina slowly walked closer. "I couldn't." "Why?" He smiled warmly. "Because every day since I left this forest." He looked directly into her eyes. "I've been thinking about you." Ada's heart skipped a beat. She had imagined hearing those words many times. But now that they were real, she didn't know what to say. The evening breeze gently moved through the trees as they stood facing each other once again. Neither of them noticed Chinedu quietly smiling from a distance. He had never seen his boss look happier. The forest that had first brought them together had now reunited them. But Obina knew this reunion was only the beginning. He still had to convince Ada that love was stronger than money. And Ada still had to decide whether she could trust her heart enough to believe that a billionaire's promise could truly be forever. The cool evening breeze gently moved through the tall trees as Ada and Obina stood facing each other outside her small shelter. For several moments, neither of them spoke. The forest seemed unusually quiet, as if even the birds were waiting to hear what would happen next. Finally, Ada broke the silence. "I honestly didn't think you would come back." Obina smiled warmly. "I told you I would." She looked down at the basket she was carrying. "People make promises every day. And they don't always keep them." Obina nodded slowly. "I know. I've been disappointed before." "So have I." Ada looked into his eyes. For the first time, she realized he wasn't speaking as a billionaire. He was speaking as a man who understood pain. She slowly placed her basket on the ground. "You must be tired. I've walked through half the forest looking for you." She smiled faintly. "I went farther than usual today. I noticed. I almost thought you had moved." Ada laughed softly. "I don't have anywhere else to go." Those simple words touched Obina's heart. He wished she would never have to say them again. "Would you like something to eat?" Ada asked. "I'd love to." She smiled. "Then help me." Obina laughed. "I was hoping you'd say that." Chinidu quietly stepped forward. "I'll wait outside." Ada looked at him kindly. "You'll eat too." "Oh, no. I don't want to disturb you." She smiled. "In this forest, nobody eats alone." Chinidu looked surprised. No one had ever invited him to share a meal so naturally. He smiled. "Thank you." Soon the three of them sat around the small fire. Ada roasted fresh rabbit while vegetables cooked slowly inside a clay pot. The familiar smell filled the evening air. Chinidu took his first bite. His eyes widened. "I understand now." Obina laughed. "Understand what?" "Why you've been talking about this food." Ada smiled shyly. "It's only simple cooking." Chinidu shook his head. "No. It's made with care." Ada thanked him with a smile. After dinner, Chinidu quietly excused himself. "I'll sleep near the vehicles." Obina nodded. "Thank you." As Chinidu walked away, Ada and Obina remained beside the fire. The stars slowly appeared overhead. Ada stared into the flames. "You've been very busy since returning?" Obina sighed. "More than you can imagine." "What happened?" "The whole country seemed to know I disappeared." She looked surprised. "Really?" There were television reports, newspapers, endless meetings, phone calls. She smiled. "I don't understand that kind of life." "I'm beginning to think I don't either." She looked at him. "You don't?" Obina slowly shook his head. "I've spent years chasing success." "Weren't you already successful?" "I was." "So why keep chasing more?" He became quiet. "I thought more money would make me happier." "Did it?" He smiled sadly. "No." Ada nodded thoughtfully. "I think happiness is strange." "What do you mean?" "The more people chase it." She gently poked the fire with a stick. "The farther away it seems." Obina smiled. "You always say simple things that make me think." She laughed. "I didn't know I was wise." "You are." The next morning, Obina surprised Ada again. Before sunrise, she stepped outside and found him already sweeping around the shelter with a handmade broom. She couldn't help laughing. "What are you doing?" "Cleaning." "I can see that. You worked while I rested." "I wanted to help." She smiled. "You're holding the broom upside down." Obina looked at it. "Oh!" Ada burst into laughter. "I was wondering why it wasn't working." He laughed too. "I still have a lot to learn." "You certainly do." For the next hour, Ada patiently showed him how to sweep properly. Although he made several mistakes, he listened carefully. "You learn quickly," she admitted. "I have a good teacher." She smiled. Later that morning, they walked to the nearby village together. As they entered the marketplace, several villagers recognized Ada. "Good morning." "Welcome." Then people noticed Obina. Within seconds, whispers spread through the market. "That's him. The billionaire. He came back. I thought he left forever." Children gathered around him curiously. One little girl tugged gently at his shirt. "Are you really rich?" Obina smiled. "I suppose people say so." She tilted her head. "Then why are you walking with Ada?" The marketplace suddenly became quiet. Everyone waited for his answer. Obina looked at Ada, then back at the little girl. "Because she's my friend." The little girl smiled brightly. "That's nice." The villagers exchanged surprised glances. Most wealthy people never mixed freely with poor villagers. But Obina greeted everyone with respect. He bought fruits from an elderly woman without bargaining over the price. He helped an old man lift heavy bags into a wheelbarrow. He even played briefly with children who ran around laughing. Ada quietly watched everything. He wasn't pretending. He treated everyone kindly, exactly the same way he had treated her in the forest. As they prepared to leave, an elderly widow accidentally dropped a basket filled with tomatoes. The tomatoes rolled across the dusty road. Some people looked. Few stopped. Without hesitation, Obina knelt down and began gathering them. Ada immediately joined him. Together they collected every tomato. The old woman smiled gratefully. God bless both of you. Obina smiled. We're happy to help. As they walked away, Ada spoke quietly. You didn't have to do that. I wanted to. You never act like you're better than anyone. He looked surprised. Why should I? Many rich people do. I've met enough of them. Obina sighed. My father always said. He smiled at the memory. Money should change your opportunities, not your heart. Ada smiled warmly. I think he raised you well. That afternoon they returned to the shelter carrying vegetables and supplies. As they rested beneath a large tree, Obina finally spoke about what had been on his heart. Ada? Yes. I've been thinking. She laughed. That's usually dangerous. He laughed with her. Maybe. Then his smile became more serious. I don't want this to be the last time I see you. She became quiet. What do you mean? I'd like to keep visiting. You don't have to. I want to. She looked away. You'll become busy again. I'll make time. Your company needs you. So do the people who work there. She nodded. Exactly. He gently interrupted. But my heart needs something too. She slowly looked back at him. My heart has been happier these last few days than it has been in years. Her breathing became slower. She didn't know how to answer. Obina continued. I know we're different. You live here. I live in the city. You have almost nothing. I have more money than I could ever spend. But none of that changes how I feel whenever I'm with you. Ada lowered her eyes. I don't understand. What? Why someone like you would even notice someone like me? Obina smiled softly. I noticed you because of who you are. You helped a stranger. You shared your food. You laughed with me. You never cared about my money because you didn't even know I had any. He paused before continuing. I've met many beautiful women, but I've never met anyone with a heart like yours. Tears slowly filled Ada's eyes. No one had ever spoken to her that way before. Not because of her appearance. Not because of what she owned. But because of her character. Still, fear remained inside her heart. What if people laugh at you? They probably will. What if your business partners refuse to accept me? I'll deal with them. What if your family doesn't like me? He smiled. They already want to meet you. She looked surprised. They do. My mother told me to bring you home. Ada couldn't believe it. She had imagined wealthy families looking down on her. His words gave her a small measure of hope. Over the following weeks, Obina kept his promise. Every weekend he returned to the forest. Sometimes he came with books. Ada had always wanted to learn to read better. Each afternoon they sat beneath a large tree. Obina patiently wrote letters in the sand with a small stick. This is A. Ada copied it carefully. Like this. Perfect. And this. That's B. She smiled proudly each time she learned a new word. In return, Ada continued teaching him about the forest. She showed him edible plants. She taught him how to identify bird calls. She explained how to find clean drinking water during the dry season. Every lesson brought them closer. The villagers began smiling whenever they saw Obina arrive. The billionaire has returned again. He never misses a weekend. I think he truly cares about Ada. Even Chinidu noticed the change. One afternoon he quietly said to Obina, Sir. Yes. I've never seen you this happy. Obina looked toward Ada, who was laughing while trying to teach him how to weave a small basket from palm leaves. He smiled. Neither have I. As the sun slowly disappeared behind the Enugu hills, Ada looked at Obina and realized something she had been trying to deny for weeks. She trusted him. Not because he was wealthy. Not because he made promises. But because every promise he made, he kept. And although she still feared the enormous difference between their worlds, the walls around her heart were slowly beginning to fall. For the first time since losing her parents many years earlier, Ada allowed herself to believe that perhaps, just perhaps, real love could find even a homeless hunter living deep inside the forests of Enugu. Several weeks had passed since Obina returned to Ada's forest. True to his word, he visited every weekend. Sometimes he brought books to continue teaching her how to read. Other times he brought seeds so they could plant vegetables near her shelter. He never came with expensive gifts. He knew Ada valued kindness more than wealth. One bright Saturday morning, Obina's black SUV stopped near the edge of the forest. As soon as he stepped out, he smiled. "This place feels more like home every time I come." Chinedu laughed. "I never imagined I'd hear a billionaire say that." Obina smiled. "Neither did I." He picked up a small bag containing books and walked toward Ada's shelter. Before he even reached it, he heard laughter. Ada was teaching 3 village children how to make small baskets from palm leaves. The children looked up. "Obina is here." They ran toward him excitedly. He laughed and greeted each of them. "Good morning." "Good morning." Ada stood and smiled warmly. "You came." "I promised." She shook her head playfully. "I know." The children giggled. One little girl whispered loudly enough for everyone to hear. "They smile every time they see each other." Ada immediately blushed. "So do you?" Obina teased. The children burst into laughter. Ada covered her face with her hands. "You should all stop laughing." But she was laughing too. After the children left, Ada and Obina walked deeper into the forest. The weather was beautiful. Sunlight filtered through the trees, while colorful butterflies fluttered among the flowers. Obina carried a small basket. Ada carried her bow. "You've become much better at walking here," Ada said. "I've had an excellent teacher. You still make too much noise." He laughed. "I suppose I'll never be a hunter." "Probably not." They both smiled. Suddenly, Ada stopped walking. "What is it?" Obina asked. She knelt beside the ground. "There are footprints." He looked down. "They look normal." She slowly shook her head. "No. What's wrong?" "They don't belong to villagers." "How can you tell?" She pointed at the marks. "Heavy boots." "There are 4 different people. They've been here recently." Obina frowned. "Maybe survey workers." "Perhaps." But something inside Ada didn't feel right. She quietly became more alert. Not far away, hidden behind thick bushes, 4 armed men watched them carefully. Their leader, a tall man with a scar across his left cheek, lowered his binoculars. "So that's the billionaire." Another man smiled. "Our information was correct." "What now?" The leader looked toward Obina. "We wait. When the right moment comes, we take him." Unknown to them, they had been hired by Chief Damien Ease, a greedy businessman who had lost several government contracts to Obina's company. Chief Damien blamed Obina for ruining his business. If he could not destroy Obina's company, he would use someone Obina cared about. Meanwhile, Obina and Ada returned to the shelter. They spent the afternoon reading together. Ada slowly sounded out each word. "They." She smiled proudly. "Forest." Obina nodded. "Excellent." She continued. "Is. Beautiful. I read it." "You did." She laughed happily. "I never thought I'd enjoy reading this much." "You learn very quickly." "Only because you're patient." Obina smiled. "You were patient when teaching me about the forest." "I suppose we're even." As evening approached, Obina prepared to return to the city. "I'll come back next weekend." Ada smiled. "I'll be waiting." He hesitated. For a brief moment, he wanted to tell her how much she meant to him. But before he could speak, Chinedu called from the path. "Sir, it's getting late." Obina nodded. "I have to go." Ada waved. "Travel safely." "You too." He walked away. Neither of them noticed the hidden eyes watching from the trees. 3 days later, Ada woke before sunrise. She decided to hunt farther into the forest than usual. She carried her bow, arrows, and a small bag of food. The forest was unusually quiet. Even the birds seemed restless. After nearly 2 hours of walking, Ada spotted a young antelope. She carefully followed it. The animal disappeared behind a cluster of rocks. Ada quietly followed. The moment she stepped into the clearing, 3 men jumped from behind the trees. Another blocked the path behind her. Ada immediately reached for an arrow. "Stay back." The leader laughed. "She's brave." Ada released the arrow. Whoosh! It struck one man's shoulder. He cried out in pain. "You'll pay for that." Another attacker rushed toward her. Ada swung her bow like a staff, striking him across the face. He stumbled backward. She turned and ran. Branches whipped against her arms as she sprinted through the forest. The kidnappers chased after her. "Don't let her escape." Ada knew every path. She leaped over fallen trees. She crossed a shallow stream. She almost escaped. Then, a thick rope suddenly tightened around her legs. She crashed hard onto the ground. Before she could stand, two men grabbed her arms. She struggled fiercely. "Let me go!" She kicked one attacker in the stomach. He groaned and fell backward. But another man wrapped a cloth around her wrists. Within moments, they tied her hands. The leader smiled coldly. "You fight well." Ada glared at him. "What do you want?" "You." "Why?" "You'll find out." They covered her eyes with a cloth and carried her away. That same afternoon, Obinna was inside the company's headquarters in Enugu. He was reviewing building plans when his phone rang. The caller ID showed an unknown number. He answered. "Hello." A rough voice spoke. "If you want to see Ada alive." Obinna's heart stopped. "Come alone." He stood immediately. "What did you say?" "We have the hunter." His hands tightened around the phone. "If you contact the police." The caller laughed. "You'll regret it." The line went dead. For several seconds, Obinna simply stood there. His face turned pale. Chinedu noticed immediately. "Sir." Obinna slowly lowered the phone. "They've taken Ada." "What?" "They kidnapped her." Chinedu's eyes widened. "Who?" "I don't know. But they're using her to get to me." Without wasting another second, Obinna pressed the emergency button on his desk. Within moments, the head of security entered. "Sir." Obinna looked directly at him. "Cancel every meeting. Prepare every available security team. Contact the police commissioner. Call the local hunters. I don't care how much it costs." His voice became firm. "We are bringing Ada home." Far away, inside an abandoned warehouse hidden near the edge of the forest, Ada sat with her hands tied. The kidnappers believed she would cry. They believed she would beg. Instead, she remained calm. She quietly studied every corner of the building. Every window, every door, every guard. The leader noticed. "You're planning something." Ada looked at him. "I'm planning to go home." He laughed loudly. "Not today." She smiled slightly. "You don't know me very well." As darkness slowly covered Enugu, dozens of police officers, local hunters, and Obinna's security team gathered near the forest. Maps were spread across the hood of an SUV. Flashlights, communication radios, rescue equipment. Everything was ready. The police commissioner looked at Obinna. "We'll find her." Obinna nodded. His face showed determination unlike anyone had ever seen before. "I promised Ada that I would always keep my word." He looked toward the dark forest. "And I refuse to let her face this alone." Somewhere beyond those trees, Ada was waiting. She had rescued him when he was lost. Now it was his turn to risk everything to rescue the woman who had captured his heart. The night had only just begun, and so had the fight to bring Ada safely home. Dark clouds covered the night sky as dozens of flashlights moved through the forest outside Enugu. Police officers searched one direction. Obinna's security team searched another. Several experienced local hunters spread out through the thick bushes, carefully examining the ground. Everyone was looking for one person, Ada. Obinna stood beside the police commissioner with determination written across his face. His expensive clothes were already covered with dust and mud, but he did not care. Only one thought filled his mind. Find Ada. One elderly hunter slowly knelt beside a narrow path. He examined the muddy ground carefully. "I found something." Everyone hurried toward him. The old hunter pointed at several footprints. 4 men. He looked farther ahead. And one woman. Obinna immediately recognized the smaller footprints. "Ada." The hunter nodded. "They're moving toward the old quarry." The police commissioner looked surprised. "The abandoned quarry?" The hunter nodded again. "They're heading in that direction." The commissioner immediately raised his radio. All teams move toward the old quarry. Be careful. The kidnappers may be armed. Within seconds, the rescue teams began moving through the forest. Obinna refused to stay behind. I'm coming too. The commissioner looked at him. It could be dangerous. I know. They may shoot. I know. You should let us handle this. Obinna shook his head. I won't leave Ada alone. Seeing the determination in his eyes, the commissioner finally nodded. Stay close to us. I will. Meanwhile, inside the abandoned warehouse near the old quarry, Ada remained tied to a wooden chair. A small lantern provided the only light inside the building. Four kidnappers sat around a table playing cards. One of them laughed. The billionaire must be terrified by now. Another smiled. He'll pay anything. The leader leaned back in his chair. That's exactly what our boss wants. Ada quietly listened. So they were working for someone else. She slowly looked around the room again. Her hands were tied behind the chair with thick rope. Her feet were also tied. A rusty window stood slightly open. 2 armed men guarded the entrance. Another walked back and forth outside. She remained calm. Panic would not help her. She remembered something her father had taught her many years earlier. When danger comes, let your mind stay calm before your body moves. She took a slow breath, then another. While the kidnappers laughed among themselves, Ada quietly rubbed the ropes against the rough edge of the wooden chair. Very slowly, the rope began to weaken. Back in the forest, the rescue team continued following the footprints. Suddenly, one of the local hunters raised his hand. Stop! Everyone froze. What is it? The commissioner whispered. The hunter pointed toward the distance. Light. Between the trees, a faint yellow glow could be seen. The abandoned warehouse. The commissioner lowered his voice. Everyone stay low. Police officers quietly surrounded the building from different directions. Obinna's heart pounded. Ada was inside. He could feel it. Inside the warehouse, Ada continued rubbing the rope against the sharp wood. Little by little, the fibers began to snap. She heard footsteps. One kidnapper walked over carrying a bottle of water. You've been very quiet. Ada looked at him. Talking won't help me. He laughed. You're smarter than most people. He turned to leave. The moment his back faced her, Ada pulled harder. Snap! The rope finally broke. She quickly kept her hands behind the chair so no one would notice. She waited patiently. The right moment had not yet arrived. Outside, the police commissioner whispered instructions. Team 1, cover the front. Team 2, take the back. No one shoots unless absolutely necessary. Obinna looked toward the building. I have to get her out. The commissioner placed a hand on his shoulder. We will. Suddenly, a loud voice echoed from inside the warehouse. Bring the girl. The kidnappers stood. The leader walked toward Ada. It's time. He reached down to untie her legs. The moment he leaned forward, Ada acted. She swung both hands forward and shoved him with all her strength. The surprised man crashed backward onto the floor. Before anyone could react, Ada kicked another kidnapper hard in the chest. He stumbled into the table, sending cards and bottles flying. What? She's free. The third man rushed toward her. Ada grabbed the wooden chair and swung it. Crash! The chair struck his shoulder. He cried out in pain. The leader shouted angrily. Catch her! Ada sprinted toward the open window. One kidnapper grabbed her arm. She twisted quickly, just as her father had once taught her. The man lost his balance. She pushed him away and jumped through the window. Glass shattered. She landed outside. Then she ran. The sound of breaking glass echoed through the forest. The police commissioner immediately shouted, Move! Police officers rushed toward the building. The kidnappers burst through the doors, chasing Ada. There she is. At that exact moment. Police! Drop your weapons! The kidnappers froze. Several officers surrounded them with flashlights. One kidnapper tried to run. A local hunter tackled him to the ground. Another reached for his gun. Police officers immediately disarmed him. The leader turned and disappeared into the darkness. Obinna wasn't watching the kidnappers. He was searching for only one person. Then he saw her. Ada! She turned. Obinna! Without thinking, both of them ran toward each other. The moment they met, Obinna pulled her into a tight embrace. For several long seconds, neither of them spoke. He simply held her. Finally he whispered, "Are you hurt?" Ada slowly shook her head. "I'm all right." He looked carefully at her face. A few small scratches covered her arms. Her clothes were dusty, but she was safe. Relief flooded his heart. "I was so afraid." Ada smiled softly. "I knew you'd come." He looked surprised. "You did." She nodded. "You always keep your promises." Those words touched him deeply. The police commissioner approached. "We caught 3 of them." "What about the leader?" Obinna asked. "He escaped." "We'll find him." One officer walked over carrying a mobile phone recovered from the warehouse. "Sir, we found messages." The commissioner examined the phone. A name appeared repeatedly. Chief Damien Ease. The commissioner frowned. "So he was behind this?" Obinna nodded. "I had my suspicions." The commissioner looked at several officers. "Arrest him immediately." "Yes, sir." The following morning, news spread across Enugu. Every television station reported the successful rescue. The kidnappers had confessed. Chief Damien Ease had ordered the kidnapping in an attempt to pressure Obinna into giving up several valuable contracts. By noon, Chief Damien had been arrested. His business empire quickly began to collapse. Justice had finally caught up with him. 3 days later, Obinna returned to Ada's shelter. This time he came alone. Ada welcomed him with a warm smile. "I'm glad you're here." "So am I." They sat beneath their favorite tree. For a while, neither of them spoke. Finally, Obinna broke the silence. "Ada." "Yes. I've been thinking about your future." She smiled. "I have a future?" "You do. And I want to help." She looked at him carefully. "I don't want charity." "I know. I don't want people saying the billionaire rescued the poor girl." "I understand." He smiled gently. "That's not what I have in mind." She waited. "I want to build you a beautiful home." Ada remained quiet. "It won't be a palace. It won't change who you are. It will simply be a safe place where rain doesn't leak through the roof." She smiled thankfully. "That's very kind. But," he looked worried, "but, I have one request." "Anything." She looked toward the distant village. "I've lived without a home for many years." "I know. There are children in those villages who also sleep hungry. There are widows with broken houses. There are elderly people with nowhere to go." She turned back to him. "If you're going to build something," she smiled warmly, "don't build only for me. Build for them too." Obinna stared at her. He had expected her to ask for a larger house, better clothes, money. Instead, she was thinking about other people. A slow smile spread across his face. "This," he gently took her hands, "is exactly why I love you." Ada's eyes widened. The words echoed in her heart. Neither of them spoke for several seconds. Then she smiled through tears. "And that's why," she whispered softly, "I trust you." Obinna squeezed her hands gently. "Then we'll do it together." Within weeks, construction began. But it wasn't only one house. Obinna's company built comfortable homes for widows, small houses for homeless families, a learning center where children could study, a medical clinic for nearby villages, clean water boreholes. The villagers watched in amazement. Many couldn't believe that a homeless hunter had inspired such kindness. Ada visited the construction site every day. She encouraged the workers. She spoke with the villagers. She made sure no family was forgotten. Soon, people stopped calling it Obinna's project. Instead, they proudly called it Ada's Village of Hope. Standing beside the newly completed homes one evening, Obinna looked at Ada with admiration. She had once believed she owned nothing. Yet through her kindness, she had given hope to an entire community. And in changing the lives of others, she had completely changed his as well. Together, They realized that the greatest wealth was never measured by money. It was measured by the number of lives touched with love, compassion, and generosity. A beautiful new beginning had finally arrived. 6 months had passed since the rescue. The forest outside Enugu was changing. Where there had once been only rough paths and small huts, there were now neat houses with strong roofs, clean water boreholes, a small health clinic, and a learning center filled with children eager to study. Flowers grew along the footpaths. Fruit trees had been planted around the village. Children ran through the open fields laughing without fear. The villagers often smiled whenever they spoke about how their lives had changed. Many still found it hard to believe that everything had started because a homeless hunter had shown kindness to a lost stranger. Every weekend, Ada walked through the village greeting everyone. She was still the same young woman she had always been. She still woke before sunrise. She still thanked God every morning. She still helped elderly people carry heavy baskets. She still smiled at every child she met. Although Obinna had built her a comfortable home, Ada never became proud. She often visited her old shelter deep inside the forest. The little hut still stood beneath the tall trees. She refused to tear it down. Whenever people asked why she kept it, she simply smiled. "This place reminds me where God found me." It was inside that humble shelter that her life had changed forever. One bright morning, Obinna arrived as he usually did. But this time, something was different. Instead of wearing his expensive business suit, he wore a simple traditional outfit. Chinedu noticed immediately. "You look nervous." Obinna laughed. "I am. I've watched you speak before thousands of investors. I've seen you negotiate billionaire contracts. You've never looked this worried." Obinna smiled. "This is much harder." Chinedu laughed. "I think I know why." Obinna reached into his pocket and gently touched a small velvet box. Inside was a beautiful engagement ring. "I hope she says yes." Chinedu placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "If she looked for your money, she would have accepted long ago. But she loves your heart. Stop worrying." Obinna smiled. "I'll try." Meanwhile, Ada was helping several children plant young mango trees near the learning center. "Dig the hole a little deeper," she encouraged one little boy. "That's it. Very good." The children laughed happily as they worked. One little girl looked toward the road. "Ada," she pointed excitedly. "Obinna is here." Ada turned. The moment she saw him, her face brightened with a smile. She walked toward him. "You're early today." "I couldn't wait." She laughed softly. "I've noticed." The children quietly gathered nearby. They always enjoyed watching the two of them together. One little boy whispered to another, "I think they'll get married." The other boy nodded confidently. "I think so too." Later that afternoon, Obinna asked Ada to walk with him into the forest. They followed the familiar path leading to her old shelter. The same tall trees still stood proudly around them. The same birds sang from the branches. Everything looked exactly as it had the day they first met. When they reached the little shelter, Ada smiled. "It hasn't changed much." Obinna looked around. "I'll always be grateful for this place." "So will I. It gave me my greatest blessing." She looked at him curiously. "What blessing?" He smiled warmly. "You." Ada lowered her eyes shyly. For a few moments, they simply stood together remembering everything that had happened. The storm, the campfire, the laughter, the rescue, the long walks through the forest. Every memory had brought them closer. Finally, Obinna took a slow breath. "Ada." "Yes. There is something I need to ask you." She looked into his eyes. He slowly reached into his pocket. When he removed the small velvet box, Ada's eyes widened. Obinna knelt on one knee. "Ada." His voice trembled slightly. "When I first entered this forest, I thought I had lost my way." He smiled. "But I now realize I was actually being led toward the greatest gift of my life." Tears slowly filled Ada's eyes. "You showed me that kindness is more valuable than wealth. You taught me that happiness can be found beside a simple campfire. You reminded me that a person's heart is worth far more than their bank account." He opened the small box. The beautiful ring sparkled beneath the afternoon sunlight. Ada, he smiled through nervousness. Will you marry me? For a moment, the world seemed to stand still. Ada looked at the ring, then at Obina. Tears rolled gently down her cheeks. She remembered the frightened stranger she had rescued during the storm. She remembered sharing her last meal with him. She remembered believing they could never belong together. Yet here he was, keeping another promise. She smiled through her tears. Yes. Her voice was soft, but full of certainty. Yes, I will marry you. Obina's face lit up with joy. He carefully placed the ring on her finger. Then he stood and gently hugged her. The children who had quietly followed them from a distance burst into loud cheers. She said yes. They're getting married. Everyone laughed. News of the engagement quickly spread throughout Enugu. People from nearby villages celebrated. Employees at Okeke Construction Group congratulated their CEO. Even newspapers reported the unusual love story. Many headlines read, "Billionaire to marry former homeless hunter." Some people criticized the relationship. Others called it impossible. But far more people admired it. They saw two people who had chosen love over social status. A month later, the wedding day finally arrived. The celebration took place in Enugu. The entire community came together. Traditional dancers filled the air with music and excitement. Colorful decorations surrounded the beautiful venue. Villagers stood side by side with company executives. Construction workers celebrated beside government officials. For one day, wealth and poverty no longer mattered. Everyone came for one reason: to celebrate love. Ada looked breathtaking in her traditional bridal attire. Her long black hair was beautifully arranged. Her warm smile lit up the entire room. Obina could hardly take his eyes off her. "You look beautiful." Ada smiled. "You've said that 5 times already. I'll probably say it 500 more." She laughed. "I don't mind." The ceremony was filled with joy. Their families blessed the marriage. The elders offered prayers. Friends celebrated late into the evening. When it was finally time for Obina to speak, he stood before everyone. "I once believed success meant becoming wealthy." He looked toward Ada. "Then I got lost in a forest." The guest smiled. "I thought that storm was the worst thing that had ever happened to me." He gently held Ada's hand. "But it became the greatest blessing of my life." He looked around the crowd. "This woman taught me something I will never forget. Real wealth isn't found in bank accounts. It's found in kindness. It's found in compassion. It's found in serving others." The audience applauded warmly. Then Ada was invited to speak. She smiled shyly. "I don't have many words." Everyone laughed softly. "I only want to thank God." She looked toward the villagers. "I also want to thank everyone who believed in us." She turned toward Obina. "I once believed our worlds were too different." She smiled through happy tears. "But love showed me that two hearts can belong together, even when their lives begin in completely different places." The applause grew even louder. That evening, as the celebration came to an end, Ada and Obina quietly returned to the old forest one last time. They stood outside the small shelter where everything had begun. The stars sparkled brightly above them. The same gentle breeze moved through the trees. Obina smiled. "Do you remember the first thing you gave me?" Ada laughed. "2 wild oranges. And the first thing you taught me? How to light a fire." He smiled. "You also taught me how to live." She gently rested her head on his shoulder. "And you taught me how to dream again." For a long time, they simply stood together beneath the stars. The forest that had once been Ada's lonely home had become the place where two completely different lives met. A homeless hunter had captured the heart of a billionaire. Not with expensive clothes, not with beauty alone, not with wealth, but with courage, honesty, kindness, and a heart that never stopped caring for others. Years later, whenever people asked Obina how he met his wife, he always smiled before answering. "I wasn't looking for love. I was just a man who got lost in the forest." Then he would gently hold Ada's hand and add, "And getting lost was the best thing that ever happened to me." Thanks for watching. If you enjoy the story, please subscribe to this channel and tell us where you are watching from.